Hey Ottawa, this is your Monday Market Snapshot for Monday, September 9th, 2024. My name is Annalie Rice. I'm a realtor here in Ottawa, Ontario, and every week I bring you the details of what's going on in the Ottawa real estate market. Just like last week, I'm going to include most of the month-end stats for August, and it will include the Ottawa Real Estate Board stats as I did receive them over the weekend. Okay, let's see what's happening. Okay, so first off, Citywide, we have the active listings bounced right back up to where they were 2 weeks ago. So last week was basically just a little blip. So the active inventory is back up, and we'll see that on the next slide when we see it in graph form. And the sales did drop by 46 this week, which was expected because of the long weekend, less people out buying, and then fewer new listings last week would create fewer sales this week. Okay, so this is the chart form for the inventory breakdown, and you can see both in the black line, which is the overall inventory, as well as the green line, which is the active inventory, that the last week was just like a little drop down blip. If you look down at the bottom there, the sales, you can see that the firm sales, the red line, dropped down this week. I expect it to come back up again next week, but the conditional sales actually climbed higher than it's been over the past weeks, showing that there was lots of activity, but they were just conditional sales. The one thing I wanted to point out, you can see that the little dash lines there show the difference between this year and last year, the same week. And you can see that, we're getting to the point where that inventory was really climbing last fall. You can see that it climbed up until the sort of November timeframe was the peak of inventory last year. And you can see this year, right now, we're actually past the peak. There could be a little bit of an increase now as people hope for a fall market, but I don't know if the inventory is going to continue to stay so elevated or if it's going to start to continue to drop off, which would be more typical year to year. Okay, so now we're going to look at the new listings. So this week we had 534 properties that came to the market. 195 of those were relisted properties. That represented 37% of the new listings, and 339 were new to the market properties. That was 63%. It's a higher than normal percentage of relisted properties, but that's a combination of the end of the month when a lot of properties expire and then get relisted, just generally, and then also that sort of doubled up with the fact that it was a long weekend and the beginning of the what people typically see as the fall market. It's a really popular time to start listing. So the relisted properties to try and, have fresh eyes when buyers are out starting to look, hopefully. It's a very common time to have people cancel and relist. So, but you do notice that the number of new listings is a huge jump. Even the number of new listings is a big jump. So there's a lot of people hoping that this fall market is going to be strong. And with the interest rate drops that we've had by the Bank of Canada, I guess we'll see whether or not the buyers are returning or not. Okay, so next up we'll look at the sales. So we had 164 sales this week, which I mentioned is, a fair drop from last week. However, due to the long weekend and, first couple weeks of school, all that totally makes sense. We had 21% of the properties that sold this week sold with no conditions, which is a bit of a jump up from the last couple weeks. And we had 27% of the properties sold at or above asking price, which we'll look at on the next slide. So for the sales within the first 7 days, it was 23 properties, which was 14% of the sales. 65% of those sold with no conditions and 78% sold at or above asking price. And those two percentages are up very significantly from last week. I think last week was a bit low just because of, fewer new listings, therefore fewer sales within that first 7 days. But it could be a little bit of a blip that probably will come down a bit next week for those, but they are significantly higher than last week. For sales within the first 30 days, which is sort of averages, slows things down, there's less volatility there. 51% of the sales, which was 84 properties, 25% of those sold with no conditions, and 38% of those sold at or above asking prices. And those didn't alter very much compared to last week. Okay, so for the properties that sold at or above asking price, again, it was a bit of a jump up this week. We had 45 sales that sold at or above asking price. 32 of those, which was 71%, sold at asking or up to 1% above asking price. 9 homes, which was 20% of those sales, sold between 1 and 5% above asking price. And then 4 homes, which was 9% of those sales, sold for more than 5% of the asking price. And for the second week in a row, the highest percentage and the highest dollar amount were different properties. The highest percentage was 7% over asking. It was a 2010 built tenanted townhome, quite a nice townhome it looked like, in Barrhaven, and it listed for $499,900, which is unreasonably low, and it sold for $530,000, which I still think is actually pretty low. The fact that it was tenanted would definitely bring the price down, but the average house of like townhome in Barrhaven is probably a little over 600, so it was probably 80,000 lower than it might have sold for normally. So I'm not sure that strategy worked great for them. And that one was being listed with an offer date and time, so perhaps that's just the best offer they got. The other one was for the highest dollar amount over. It was $80,001 over asking. It was a luxury 2-bedroom plus den condo just off Riverside in a gated community. It was listed for $1.185 million and it sold for $1.265 and $1. So pretty fancy condo there, and price is well over asking. Next, we'll zoom into the different areas of the city and see what's going on there. Okay, so first off, in the central urban region, we see that the active listings jumped up, mostly in the condo market, and they pretty much reversed themselves just like the main overall stats there. And the sales across property types were down this week. Okay, in Canada and Stittsville, we see an increase to the number of detached and towns on the market. Condos stayed steady at 38 there, and the sales were down slightly for detached and townhomes, and I would say that that's pretty low considering the number of properties that are on the market, and condos just an increase of just 1. And in Barrhaven, Riverside South, we have the increase of detached homes on the market, a slight decrease, continued slight decrease there in the towns, and condos were also down a little bit there. Sales were down across property types just slightly, and I would say that detached and town sales right now in Barrhaven, Riverside South seem quite slow. Maybe we'll see an increase in the next few weeks as the fall market kicks up. And finally, in Orleans, we have an increase in across property types there. And then the sales this week were up slightly for detached and then down slightly for the towns and condos. Here is the full data for the detached homes, and the thing I like to point out here is just that the number of conditionally sold properties citywide there, that's the third from the right column, is well above the number of firm sold properties this week. So I do expect that the detached homes will have a higher number of firm sales next week. Okay, so this is the same thing for townhomes. A lot more solid on the average prices. There's a lot less volatility on this because the products are a lot more, I'm going to say, congruent. And you can see that there's not as much variances there. And finally, here's the full data for the condos, and the same thing holds true here. We're in 83 for conditionally sold, only 46 sold this past week, so do expect that that will climb next week. Okay, so next up I'm going to share the Ottawa Real Estate Board month-end stats for August, and then I'll go over the charts just updated slightly because the data last week was pulled on the 1st of September, so there has been a few little updates there, and I'll point them out. Okay, so first off, the Ottawa Real Estate Board stats. They are created by the Canadian Real Estate Association, and there were 1,100 units that sold this past month, and that was a 10.2% increase from August 2023, but it was quite a significant drop from the 5 and 10-year average. And when we get to the charts in a couple slides here, you'll see sort of why that is. Those numbers climbed like a bigger drop in the 5 and 10 than they were last month or past months there, and I'll show you why on the charts. Year over year for the benchmark prices, they basically all declined just slightly there, except for the townhome rows. They slightly increased year over year. And then finally, I have the graphic from the Ottawa Real Estate Board. So it shows you the average days on market for properties that sold. Again, I still think that that's a bit low. The number of properties sold, new listings, active listings, and then it's got the two benchmarks for single family and apartment style properties. Okay, so this is the month-to-month average sale price. These are back to my stats, not the Ottawa Real Estate Board stats. So this is the City of Ottawa boundaries and the average sale price in July versus August. So this is month to month. And you can see that across the board, there were average sale prices for all the different property types dropped, most notably in the condos. But price drops are very normal throughout the summer. So please don't be alarmed. And you'll see that on the charts in the next few slides. Okay, so this is for the detached, and the next 4 slides are going to be broken out into the property types. So I've got the detached, and I just want to point out that like the average sale price, you can see that the sort of bundle of bars for each month as you go to the right, they tend to go down. Very normal. So price drops through the fall when you're comparing month to month are very, very normal to be dropping. Perhaps what's more notable is when you're looking at year to years, which would be the tiny little bars, the black line versus the green bars, the darkest green bar there from 2023. And so we'll just keep an eye on those as we go along. This is the same chart for the semi-detached properties, and there is obviously more volatility with the semi-detached, as I say every time. The product of a semi-detached can be very different. It can be older and in less desirable areas versus the luxury ones that are popping up all over the place, especially in places like Westboro. Okay, so this is the same thing for townhomes. A lot more solid on the average prices. There's a lot less volatility on this because the products are a lot more, I'm going to say, congruent. And you can see that there's not as much variances there. And this is final. This is for the condominiums, and I don't separate the row condominiums from the apartment condominiums. This is all condominiums, and it would include even those stacked ones. And you can see, unlike a lot of the other property types, the condominiums tend to see a little bit of a price increase through the fall. Perhaps the fall market is a bit more of a common time for condo sales. So you can see that typically September and October see a little bit of a price bump, and we'll have to see whether or not we see that this year. Okay, so these 3 charts are the close price, so that's the sale price to the original list price ratio. So it shows you how close to the original asking price on that listing sales are happening. So generally in the 97, a little over 97 to 98%. So most homes are selling below the original asking price. Obviously, when we were looking at the properties that are selling within the first 7 days and 60% of those selling above asking price, those ones are pulling up that average. But then on the other hand, the other 80% of the sales that aren't within the first 7 days have a lot less chance of being over asking, and those ones are offsetting those averages to bring them to these. This is the average days to sell, and this is why I commented on the Ottawa Real Estate Board. They had 24 days as the days to sell or days on the market, and my stats don't show that. Their stats do include different areas, so it's possible that it's different, but maybe it's just a different stat. But these are for the properties that have sold in each month. How many days was the average days to sell? And you can see that it's solidly between 30 and almost 40 days, quicker for townhomes, but it's still taking 30 days on average, and closer to the 35 to 40 days for detached and condos. Okay, so these are the monthly sales for the last 10 years. That's what's on my title, although I should probably update that because I do have the 2013 and 2014 stats on there. So it really is the 11 or 12 years. And I'm not going to delete those because I like the history. But so you can see that our sales this August were higher than the 2022 and 2023. Those are the dark blue and the darkest purple there. So if it was an average of the last 3 years, we'd be higher than that average. However, if you recall back for the Ottawa Real Estate Board stats, it had the sales compared to the last 5 years and the sales compared to the last 10 years, and they were both drastically below that. And so the last 10 years, I think you're fairly safe to use all of those dots. So you can see that we're really only the fourth lowest sales in the last 10 or 12 years there. So that is why you've got that average. But the fact that those numbers climbed so high, like negative 14% over the last 10 years, it's because of the 2020 and the 2021 numbers really factor in there, even 2019. You can see that they were extremely high, especially 2020 there. That's that one that's abnormally low in the spring because of the shutdowns, and then really, really high through the fall. We had record-breaking sales that fall. And so for this month and the next couple of months, you're going to see that the averages compared to the last 5 and the last 10 years are going to seem really, really low. And it doesn't mean that our sales are ridiculously low. It's just that those averages for the 5 years and 10 years are being pulled up so drastically by some really abnormal years. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Okay, so the last one here, we have the months of inventory, kind of solidly sitting in the mid 3s for detached and condos, and down at 2.1 for towns. So still a little bit of a tight market for townhomes, especially if they're well priced, not tenanted, such things like that. That's pretty good. And if you need a recap on that, so the months of inventory is how many months it would take to sell all the current inventory if no more properties came on the market, if the sales stayed at the same level that they were at through this month. So typically does climb through the fall because sales drop off faster than the inventory drops off. And so that's why you see the peaks usually in the fall, and closer to the end of the fall, then the inventory starts coming off and it can come back down. And finally, I say it every week or every month when I do this. This is the months of inventory for all property types, all added into one, and we're sitting at about the 3-month mark for overall inventory. I think it's more beneficial to look at the other charts where you're looking at least the property type, but you can go even more detailed into that, into the certain area of the city or even neighborhoods if there were enough data for that. It really does matter what you're looking for, in which area, and how many homes are selling and how quickly in the specific area. But as an overall stat, this shows that we're still technically by the definitions in a seller's market. And we have been here since 2017. So there aren't enough houses, and it seems like it's a buyer's market or a balanced market, but that's just because we're comparing it to the years when we were down at more like 1 month of inventory, which was crazy for everybody. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the update. Please give it a like. It helps other people find the info and the videos. If you do have any questions, please drop the questions in the YouTube comments. I'm happy to answer them. And I hope you have a fantastic week.